understand. Welcome to our philosophical discussions.
My name is Salman,
And I'm Mishwari.
and our big question today is,
Do you consider consciousness to be a unique inherent trait to humans?
oh, and our two guests are,
Noor.
guys, say your name, thank you.
I'm Noor and
Rashid.
okay.
Alright, so let's have our guest start us off today. Do you guys think consciousness is a unique inherent trait to humans? Oh, no, all at once, guys.
Can you start, since you've been here before?
Yeah.
Yes, that honestly I don't have like a point right now.
All right, Rashid, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, yes. I think breaking the question up is a bit easier. First things first, like describing consciousness itself is a very difficult thing to do. I sort of almost categorize it as like a question that's almost unanswerable right now, scientifically. Mainly because it's not scientific by nature. Like it's not objective. You can't look at consciousness. You can't get data about consciousness. You'll measure with it. The closest thing we have is neuroscience. So I guess that can be like a sub-question you can start off with, like what do each of you think consciousness is, and then we'll move on to the inherent trait. So yeah, what do you guys think?
Okay, so what do you think consciousness is, first of all?
Me?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I like to take a scientific view towards it. Philosophy is a bit skeptical, but again, everything like philosophy is the bedrock for science to me. Like
Yeah.
it starts with skepticism, and then you get into empirical stuff and all that data. But I think theoretically, consciousness is just like the choreographed motion of different particles. We don't know what particles can be quarks smaller than protons, just small tiny particles that are all like they're like varying in some state. I think it's some sort of fluctuation. That's what I think it is. There's lots of theories. I think someone just kind of dropped out.
Yeah, back.
Yeah, but that's what I think it is. I mean, we have this brain of ours, this gloopy gray structure. But I think within it there are particles. I can talk on and on about that, but there are particles that are not gloopy and gray that can sort of exist in that way. So that's my stance. I think scientifically.
Okay.
Later on, we'll have some.
Wait, can I say what I think consciousness is?
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, consciousness is basically like one's ability to like be aware of like their surroundings and the people that are around them. And I think that I personally think, why do I always say I personally think? Doesn't mean anything. Anyways, I think that both animals and humans are conscious, or certain animals, but I just think that humans, it might be to like a greater extent, and they might have a more deep, like not conscious, but like conscience. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's the word? You got it.
Salman?
What are we on? Kind of had technical difficulties.
What we think consciousness is, or what does it mean to be conscious?
You can't really define it because we don't really know if it exists, because you can't really prove it, but we know it's there because we're experiencing it. Like we can. So I think it's like the ability to think about what you're thinking. So think about your thoughts, right? So you know why you're doing something. I feel like only humans have that, because I feel like animals, when they grow up, they're meant to do a certain things, like lions stuff. They're meant to hunt, right? But they don't think why they hunt. They like hunt food, right? That's it. But I feel like as humans, we have the capacity to understand why we do something, and like the meaning behind it. Whereas animals, they just it's what they do. It's their nature, and that's why humans have progressed so much further than animals have.
Okay. All right. What I define consciousness as is quite the opposite to Salman. I think it's just simply being aware of your existence, and in that, that would almost be sort of your instinct to survive, your instinct to do X, Y, and Z for your existence to remain its existence. And so that's what I describe as consciousness. And in that case, I would say yes, animals do have a sense of consciousness. So no, consciousness wouldn't really be inherent to humans, but we'll obviously go greater into depth with that as we continue. So, all right, now that we've all defined what we think consciousness as, and so we all know where we're each coming from and what viewpoint and standpoint we have on that, let's delve deeper into the question, which is, do you think only humans are conscious or have consciousness?
Depends what consciousness is. Like, we don't know what it is.
Okay, so going by your
I
definition.
guess.
Um,
I guess.
can, like,
Yeah, go on.
we can like look up the definition of like consciousness and see what it
It's
says.
a philosophy-based podcast. We're not going by real life definition.
I know.
Just
but,
let's just Google the answer, guys. There's no need for the
Oh.
podcast.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying like like general term for consciousness and what it means. I know that people have like different opinions on it, and like they think they can think it's something different, but
Don't Google it, because then it's all of us going by the same thing, and that's not interesting.
okay then. Sure.
Okay. Sorry, Arash, you were saying something?
Responding to Salman's comment, I think, can you repeat what you said? I kind of blanked out there. You said something about not knowing what consciousness is, something before that.
I was like, you don't know what it is, right? I mean, we can't really define it because there's no way to even prove that it exists, but it's just a feeling. It's kind of like a feeling, like consciousness is like, it's knowing that you're alive, right? It's knowing that you're something.
I mean,
that's what I think it is.
Sorry.
You kind of know it exists.
You kind of know what?
You know it exists because like if you're aware of like what's happening around you and you're aware that you're alive, then you're conscious.
But there's no scientific way to prove it. That's what I'm saying.
There's two common arguments to both those comments. I'll start off with the first one. Many people quote it to be the hard problem of consciousness. It's called that because it's quite difficult to explain, but how it essentially works is, like, think about it. Our brain is what? Just like a combination of different stuff, I guess, different particles. But right now, we don't believe those particles are conscious by any degree. We don't think they think like we do, right? We can't assume particles are aware because we can't feel what it is to be like a particle. We don't understand that thing. So the hard problem essentially is, how can non-conscious entity combine to make a conscious entity? Where's the gap there? There is a gap there. And how you fill up that gap is what's going on right now, to different means. So
I can't really deny that.
Sorry,
how do you create something living out of something? So it's like, so your brain is made up of like biological unconscious things, right? I can't think for themselves. Mm-hmm. How does a mixture of that lead to us being conscious?
I guess it's the sort of way any sort of scientific thing happens. Not any sort of scientific thing, but like you mix a bunch of reactive things and then all of a sudden it's not a reactive thing. So in this case, it's quite the opposite. Possibly the certain combination of those components I'm panting around the stairs, is what makes it to be the way we are. And so in that, again, depending on whether you think it's just for humans or just animals, that would depend on, again, the sort of combination. So if you think humans don't have a sense of consciousness, what is it about their combination of those components that makes it to be like that, and that makes it to be the way we are, if you're considering it in that sort of sense?
I think that, well, I said it already, but I think that both animals and humans are conscious. I just think that animals act in a way that's more like formated, kind of. So like they don't really know why they're doing it. I mean, for example, if they're hunting, they know that they have to feed, and that's the reason why they're gonna go hunting and stuff, but they're not gonna what am I even saying? Okay. Sorry, I'm tired. But humans are gonna understand every aspect of it, and they're also gonna understand like the morals that are behind it. And I think that's what makes human consciousness so unique, because like they understand the right and wrong behind it.
Do you think that's always the case? Do you think humans always know why they're doing something? Or are there cases where we just do something because that's the way it's always been?
No, because you can do something by like intuition, right? Where you don't think about it and it's just like you gotta react to something.
That's what I was getting at.
You're not really thinking about what you're doing, you're just doing it.
Exactly.
Like what?
I don't know, like when someone punches you, you duck. You don't go like, oh, he's punching me, I will go down now. It's just an instinct, right? You either go back.
Yeah,
or
true.
you put, like when you're falling, you put your arms in front of you. You don't think about it, but you just do it. So to like protect yourself.
I guess, but
yeah, but that's like an instinct. That's the same thing as like animals. I'm saying that we both have that animals and humans have that, like just instincts that make them behave the way they do. I'm just saying that humans have like a different layer to that, which is understanding in other situations where instincts are not involved, why they're doing it and why it's right.
So what it sounds like, you think that we understand implications better than animals, and so in that sense we consider implications, and that's what sort of makes our consciousness. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's what makes human consciousness so unique.
Okay. All right, but have you ever done something just because it's felt right without really considering the implications?
Yeah.
Well, probably.
Sorry, someone something is doing shade. Yeah.
I probably have, but it's not about like whether you're doing it. It's like more about the fact that you can do it, you're able to do it, and you know you can do it, when animals don't really understand that. They just do it.
Okay. Okay, so what's the point exactly that you're trying to
okay, basically animals humans have the ability to understand. Well, animals don't, or not as much. They just act and like humans, there's actually like some thinking involved behind every action that they do.
Okay, so you don't think animals have that in the same way that we do?
I think it links to like the ability to think. So you look like you're making fun of me. It's fine. I got used to it. I think that if you're able to, the reason we think that some people might think that animals aren't like really conscious of like what they're doing and stuff, it's because like they don't really have the ability to think.
Okay, so that's the standpoint you're going.
Animals can't think.
No, I mean, you got it. Okay, they can think.
No, they can't think as far as humans can think.
Exactly.
But then that could be quite disproven with dolphins, for example, because like the brain fold that determines how like in depth your thinking goes. I don't know that I would say I would agree with that, because like dolphins, for example, I know we're completely going off topic now, but dolphins, for example, have such advanced thinking compared to us, in the sense of the way they think, and they're much more intelligent creatures than us. But so then that again comes down to, is the reason maybe that they haven't progressed as far as us simply due to consciousness? Probably not. There are probably other factors that go into it, but I don't know that I would agree with the stance of humans think in a way that animals don't. Or maybe they do think in a way that animals don't, but it's more in the sense of like, we don't seem to understand the way they think, and that's why we think that they don't think, I guess, so to say. And so I know we've completely digressed, but going back to consciousness, what do you guys think? How do you guys think that would be represented in animals if it did exist within animals and it wasn't just a human trait?
It does exist because I mean, if they were unconscious creatures, right?
Mhm.
When something would, so like when a dog, like it's like like have you seen those videos where like a family member passed away and the dog's like really sad,
Mm.
like you can see it visibly upset? I feel like you need to have like knowledge of your understand of your surroundings to even experience that emotion. And I feel like if he was unconscious, it would mean nothing to him because he wouldn't be aware of his surroundings. So I feel like animals do experience a lot, like a big level of consciousness. Maybe not as much as humans. Maybe they're more primal. Maybe they don't think about it. Maybe they can't think as advanced as us, some of them. And I feel like that's what majorly separates us.
Okay.
Is that maybe like the reason why, for example, I know that maybe it's not really the fact that they're conscious, it's more the fact that they can feel. I know that, for example, like chameleons, they can't feel anything. They can't feel love or things like that. They don't have emotions. So I mean, I guess I would say, like, for example, chameleons are conscious and they are aware of like their surroundings and stuff, but they wouldn't really react to it because they don't really have the ability to.
Okay. So is that your way of saying that they don't have the sense of consciousness in the way we do, or they just don't have a sense of consciousness?
I think they have a sense of consciousness. It's just that whether you kind of interact with like your surroundings depends on whether you're also able to like well, reason or feel emotions.
Okay. Rashid, any thoughts?
Yeah, too. I guess I can sum it up into one, but I think Noor's point was pretty sort of interesting. But I think we can categorize what she's saying in terms of emotional intelligence. I think that's the word for it, or the ability to feel, as she said, love or other things. But at the end of the day, creatures, animals, or any organism, including us, anything which is living, wants to continue its or maintain its fitness and wants to reproduce and wants to sort of pass its DNA along the line, regardless of what it is, right? There's not a single animal that doesn't want to continue or sort of pass on its DNA. But I think consciousness is like more than that. It's not emotional intelligence. It's not the ability to feel things. I don't even think it's your ability to think you're aware. I think consciousness is much more simple than that. I don't know how to vocalize it, but I agree. I don't think it is. Yeah.
Could you repeat, please?
Okay. I'll repeat. I'll sum it up in a few bullet points.
Just the last part.
The last bit? Okay. I really don't think consciousness is awareness. I think it's way more simple than that. It's way more fundamental than just awareness. Not scientists, because there's no evidence for this. But I don't know. I think, look, there's brain activity, there's neuroscience, there's psychology, which focuses on behavior, which is sort of what you guys were talking about. But I think the actual physical brain hasn't gone to that level. We don't even understand why neurons fire. We just understand they fire. It's all we really know right now. So I guess I leave it up to the hands of philosophical and scientific progression to figure that out. But
I mean,
yeah.
There's another way you can look at it. So if you look at it through religion, right? In almost every religion, you have a soul, right? And that defines your consciousness. So I know, for example, in Islam, you have a soul that is put into you at your birth, and that is who you are as a person. And this body is more like it's like a cover, right? And that explains consciousness, but obviously you can't prove that you have a soul. But in the Quran, it's noted that the soul is what gives you the power to think for yourself and think about yourself. So I feel like if you look at it through the religion classes, you can obviously say that your consciousness is your soul, and you can't really prove a soul. You have to go by the word of God.
Okay. I'd again have to disagree with what he was saying, which is that consciousness is a lot more simpler than sort of emotional intelligence. I'd say not completely, because I think consciousness is much deeper than that, in the sense of not only do you have your like your woken conscience, the conscience you have when you're awake and you're aware, which is obviously the sort of being aware of your surroundings and being aware of your existence. But there's also your subconscious, which we haven't really talked about, which I guess you could argue is not exactly being conscious. But it is to do with sort of your lifestyle and the way that it goes into that. And so I think the depth of subconscious that we have as humans is quite inherent towards us. But again, we don't necessarily know this because we are not animals. But the depth of like that and the depth of our subconscious and our conscious itself is something that I think is inherent to humans, whichever way you look at it, in terms of the way Salman said or in terms of the way Noor said it. It's something that sort of, I'm trying to put into words, it's something that, yeah, is inherent to humans in that sort of sense and in the depth of it. But I think consciousness in terms of being aware, or in terms of the simplified version as it was put, is something that, yeah, animals totally do experience, or humans do experience, and any living being, so to say, would experience it in terms of simply being aware, if we're looking at it in that sort of sense.
I wanted to pick up about like Salman's idea, like his talk about religion. I found it very interesting because I had to take this philosophy class this year and had to talk about Aristotle and Plato, boring stuff, honestly. But something interesting was in every single depiction of Plato and Aristotle, in any picture, there's one famous one, I can send you the link afterwards, but in every picture, essentially Aristotle points up and Plato points down, or sorry, Socrates points down every single time. And essentially the idea was Aristotle thinks that consciousness or the mind is sort of funneled to the heavens. Obviously, Christianity was the reigning religion at the time, so they had to quote it as the heavens. But I think that sort of parallels what Salman was saying, which is sort of interesting. I think that's interesting. There have been, by the way, scientific stuff that shows that there's some remains of our mind after we like die in our physical body, which is sort of interesting. I guess as that progresses, there might be more stuff that comes up, but that was something interesting. So, yeah.
And since you've done Aristotle, we can take one of his principles, which I mentioned, I think, a couple of weeks ago, but he says that if you have something, if you have all of something's components put together, and you take one of the components out, if the whole thing falls apart, it was essential, right? Obviously, that's just logic. Do you guys think that?
Kind of like that.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Aristotle says that if you have something and that made up of all its components, right? And you take a single component out, and the whole thing falls apart. Obviously, that one component was essential, right?
Yeah.
I think we could all agree or are on common ground that consciousness is a very essential thing in our being, no matter what way you look at it. And so to what degree do you guys think that in humans, since we're focusing on humans, how important is consciousness? Because I'm sure we all agree that it is important, but to what degree do you sort of think that it is important in either the religious aspect or in the sort of scientific route that we're taking? Salman, what are you doing?
Something. I think it's very important. I feel like I feel like your consciousness and your physical body is the base of a person, is what makes a person. So like the fundamental building blocks of a person is their consciousness and a physical body. I feel like, and if you take one of those away, if you have a physical body that can't even think for themselves, they become like they're basically a rock, like a human like rock, because they can't think for themselves. They're basically not living at this point. They can't do anything that helps themselves because they can't think to do something, or they're not aware of what's going on around them.
Okay.
I guess I have a comment I think you said something about parts, which was super interesting. I sort of have an objection to that because I was thinking about, are there parts to consciousness and stuff like that. Well, there's two ways of thinking about it. One was through psychology. The first ever quoted psychologist, his name was William Wundt, and psychology essentially, instead of focusing on behavior early on, it focused on conscious experience. And he tried to basically think of consciousness in terms of parts. It was called a structuralist point of view, which basically means there's structure to consciousness, there's parts of it, and he wanted to examine what these parts were. But the entire thing was failed. And recently they did like a sort of look into it, like why did it fail? Why did structuralism not work out? Why did you not uncover parts of it? And I don't know, I can give like an example. Like something with parts to me is something which is like you can say computational. Like if you look at like a calculator, I don't know, like that has parts, right? If you take out its battery, then it's kind of gone, it doesn't function anymore. But I don't know, like you can't really prove consciousness is like that.
Yeah.
Is consciousness the whole? Is it just one entity made up of one thing? Or is it something way more fundamental with different parts? We don't know. But I highly doubt consciousness is made up of parts. Because then our thinking would be very different. Our thoughts would be very segmented.
You can't really answer this question without having a definition of what consciousness is. Because I mean, at this point, consciousness could be the whole you. Maybe it requires, maybe you need the anime heart to be a conscious person. So unless you know what it is, you can't really define if it's.
Yeah. And I think that's where we're all coming from.
Did you guys get it, or was I lagging?
Got that.
It was like, I
Okay.
didn't hear it.
Should I go again? I was saying, like, unless we can define what consciousness is, you can't really put if it's essential or not. Because unless we have an understanding of what it really is, you can't. All there is theories, that there's no scientific way to prove it. But I feel like some are more viable than others because we do experience it, but there's no way we can prove it.
Okay, and I guess that's where we're all coming from. Obviously, our very different standpoints, and obviously we can't look at consciousness. But do you guys think that if consciousness was split into parts, depending on what belief you take, what do you think it would be made up of? Do you think it would be comprised of emotion, or would it be comprised of survival instinct, or your intuition, or your reason, or anything like that?
I think that like instincts and things like that, they're more in like your subconscious because you act without knowing. So I think that's more in like the subconscious part of your brain, and that's why you act without knowing. And I think that what was I gonna say? Okay, and so our thinking basically just happens in the conscious part of like your conscience, because like there's the subconscious and the conscious part, and I think that that's like like how's it called again? Like like I saw something in psychology, and my teacher was like, how you have an iceberg, and basically like your conscious part is just the part that's like above the ocean, and then the subconscious is where like everything else happens and you're not aware of it. So I think to some extent we're kind of oblivious to things that are happening because they're all happening in our subconscious.
Okay, and so going back to the question I asked, which part of that do you think, or what do you think that's comprised of, if anything, specifically, if you think that's comprised of anything?
I think a big part of it would probably be emotion and reason.
So in emotion, do you think that Dave, from when we looked at it in TSA, for some background information, Dave's this guy who had an operation and a part of his brain was damaged that left him without the ability to feel any sort of emotions. That's basically the Dave case. Do you think that Dave perhaps didn't have a sense of consciousness or lost a part of his consciousness because of that?
Yeah, I think. Oh wait, go ahead.
No, you were talking. That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. I think that he wasn't as aware of like his surroundings because of his loss of
Emotion.
to like feel emotions, and so yeah, he wasn't as conscious as well normal people would be.
I feel like he was yeah, my bad. Actually, you were talking before.
All right. Super great point. I think I sort of want to take the same path North said, essentially. But I think it's in terms of like a little bullet point list, you can think of it as consciousness and subconscious as one category. That leads to thought, which leads to emotion, which leads to behavior. That's the sort of approach most people look at. Now, let's focus on consciousness and thought. And that's exactly what happened to Dave. He lost the ability to think about, I think, with emotion, literally. Like, he couldn't feel anything, happy, sad, whatever. Which essentially establishes the fact that there actually is a bridge, like an actual physical bridge in the brain, which disables a certain part of your cognitive ability, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Because that sort of implies that there might be an on and off switch for like your brain, essentially. Like, what if you can turn off more than just your emotions, given the fact that this button exists? But I don't think like it's that easy. I don't think it's a chunk of your brain. I think it's very, very small.
I feel like, I feel like emotion. I mean, I feel like he was conscious. I feel like he was like fully conscious. I feel like his ability to act on his consciousness was removed by emotion because I feel like he knew what was going on around him, but he couldn't process it emotionally. So I feel like he was conscious. He knew what he was doing, but he didn't know why, or he couldn't process why he would do something, or couldn't process what to do emotionally. Okay, but he did know what was going on, which is the fact.
And I think that's the sort of coming off from what you're saying, the sort of thinking with your head instead of thinking with your heart, which is probably what he was doing in that case. But I think no one is really thinking only with your heart or thinking only with your head. But I think in Dave's case, it would have been thinking just with his head or following his head or whatever you want to call it. And so in that, yeah, I could see that potentially maybe part of his consciousness was not removed, but potentially damaged in his way to make sort of well-informed decisions based on emotion, because emotion does play a big part of it and a big part of your decision making. And so in that probably would have damaged his reason as well. And so that's another way to look at it. Any final thoughts, guys?
No.
Brilliant.
I mean, you asked the question,
like,
I answered.
You know, have you seen them comedy shows where they're like, anyone from Atlanta? Noor would just be like, no, I'm from Morocco. You don't gotta answer it if you're not like from there.
This is all going in the actual podcast. Okay, so finally in closing with a, I guess, simple yes or no, and like a single sentence as like a final statement or whatever. Do you think that consciousness is inherent to humans, or it's an inherent trait towards like humans just as it is?
Yes and no. We can't know, can we? I feel like unless we know what it is, we can't really give it to someone.
Okay.
Yeah. Nor you can go.
Okay. I think that both animals and humans have a sense of consciousness. I just think that the human sense of consciousness is like more deep, and they can like think more about their actions compared to animals.
Yeah. Rashid?
I think as of right now, my answer is no, because I don't know how it feels like you are animals, so I don't know if you guys are conscious. I don't know if anything is conscious. So right now, no, I don't think so.
Are you conscious?
I am aware that I'm conscious. I think I am, unless everything's an illusion or a simulation. That's a different argument.
Is a simulation, and we all just get controlled by some higher entity that's simulating a sort of very powerful computer.
Exactly. We could all be living in a quantum computer. God knows.
That's mad, bro.
Yeah.
That's mad.
I'd sort of go with.
Why can't they make it better? Like, why do they have to make the world so shit?
I don't know. Maybe, neural network doesn't work with an algorithm. Maybe we because that's just who we are.
Make something right. Why is there depression? Why does it exist?
Well, why do you have kids that die of cancer? There's always a reason why.
What?
Okay, thank you so much for watching.
Wait, Ashwati,
Alright,
please.
guys, don't die of cancer.
If you have any, I'm muting
people
everyone right now. If you have any comments or suggestions, please put them in the box below. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week.
Okay, Ashwati, cut that part out where I said about like children's dying of
No,
cancer.
please don't. Don't. It's too good. It's
That's
too good.
going in.